Guy Milliere, you left France because of the socio-political condition there. And Michael, your party, based in Brussels, has gotten ostracized, marginalized because of the socio-political, both the political and the media bias. What's taking place there in French-speaking Europe today?
Well, I think that they are fighting hard in the Western world. Usually, people that have our opinions, and basically by treating us, of racist, fascist, or whatsoever. What I explained this morning is that in Wallonia, which is a French-speaking part of Belgium, which is the center of Europe, we have Brussels there. They went one step further. It's clearly negating the existence of populists. I had set a party that had a member of parliament, and we were forbidden to participate to any political debate on TV. We weren't invited to any debate organized by whatsoever organization. If polls were mentioned, they would mention, on the TV, the result of the party is above us, the result of the party is under us, but not our results. So a total negation of our existence. And I think it's a threat. It's a threat, and I wanted to explain it this morning at this convention.
Uh-huh. What's the characteristic about your party which is antithetical to what they think is acceptable?
No, first of all, my party wanted basically to limit migration, to fight radical Islam, to restrict public spending, restore a sound economics, so nothing extraordinary. And we are also critical about the hysteria around climate change and Greta Thunberg and so on. And all these views and positions looks to be unacceptable for the establishment, and not only, of course, the political establishment, but also the media. And they believe they are the gatekeepers of what can be heard or not heard by the audience. And that's basically the idea they were fighting.
Uh-huh. Do conservative parties, or Republican, the equivalent Republican in the U.S., do conservative parties receive fair representation in European media?
No, I think that we have a problem. The conservative are already usually badly treated. But if you are a populist, if you go one step further in the criticism of the establishment, of the EU establishment, because a lot of conservatives are pro-EU in Europe. If you go one step further, you are critical of the EU institution. You are critical of globalism. You get a very unfair treatment. It goes from being called a name, as I say, and being ostracized, to being totally negated. This is, of course, the worst that can exist. And I was explaining too, because I had a question also very often, okay, but you have the social media and so on. It's true. And we were fairly good at social media. I had my own studio of television. We had our own program. We had hundreds of thousands of people following us. But if you don't have the legitimacy of the mainstream, which means that if you are not in the debate with the other in the mainstream, the social media are not enough. That's the big what we have learned from the Walloon and Belgian experience, at least. And the result of this is that as a protest, I couldn't caution anymore this lack of democracy. I say, I don't want to play anymore. If you are not prepared to respect the minimum of rule of democracy, I just liquidated my party. It was a kind of statement I made, although we had a full organization, but I said, enough is enough.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Milliere, what do you think? Is it Dr. Milliere? You have a PhD in some, you're a professor?
I used to be a professor. Now I live in the United States, and I chose to leave France because of what Michael was saying. I didn't have a political party, but I was a political advisor for some people. For example, for Alain Madelin, who was Secretary of Finance in France. And he was pushed aside, and he was so much pushed aside that he decided to leave politics. And I could say that the situation is worse and worse. And I could say that you have to understand that the left is totalitarian. and the left doesn't accept what is not the left. If you don't belong to the left, or if you do not submit to the left, they push you aside, they destroy you, and they can destroy your political party. They can also make that your books have no success at all because they don't
Your
speak
life
about.
miserable.
Yes, and they can make your life miserable. They can try to make you almost homeless. You can lose all the positions you have. If you work in a newspaper, they can get you fired. If you work on TV channel, it's the same thing. If you're a university professor, and I used to be a university professor, they try to push you to be fired, saying that you're a fascist, that what you say is disgusting. So you have constant harassment, threats. They make your life really miserable, and I could say that if you look at the present situation in France, you could say you don't have any conservative party. All the parties that have a chance to get elected, to gain power, are parties belonging to the left. You have different kinds of left, but all of them belong to the left.
Just to give an idea of the cursor, where the cursor in terms of politics lie, in Wallonia we had 7 parties with mine. 6 were openly on the left. One was openly center to the right. And the former chairman of the center to the right party in Wallonia were asked once if he was American, for whom would he support, for whom would he be voting? And the answer, Sanders. Bernie Sanders. So our center to the right party in Wallonia is former president, by the way,
Former presidential candidate.
former president of the party, by the way, the father of the current prime minister, that will be the future president of Europe. His choice was Sanders. This shows you where the cursor of European politics lies. And the moment you are just, a normal, a conservative, right-wing person, that you hold conservative views in terms of frontiers, of sovereignty, of nationalism, you become immediately, if you are not left, you are a fascist. There is no, because you can have real fascists. I mean, they can accept. They are a tiny minority, but they are. But you are just put in the same basket, with these people.
Mm-hmm. Is there conservative media? I know, isn't Euronews based in Belgium?
Yeah, but Euronews is certainly not a conservative media. It's clearly a mainstream. It's financed by the EU. So basically, I can tell you, for example, that in Wallonia, you have absolutely no conservative newspaper or media of whatsoever nature. The only one that exists, I had to create it myself. It was called A.F.A. Was fairly successful, but we're totally isolated. And for the rest, they are all leftist or left to the center. And I want to tell you that there are approximately, certainly, 1,000 professional journalists, 2,500 professional journalists, in Wallonia. I can tell you there are only 3 or 4 that would consider themselves and present themselves as a conservative or right journalist. 3 or 4 out of 1,200 or 1,500 journalists. That's the situation, that's the reality. In terms of university, it's even worse. It's worse than France and so on. I do not know any academic professor university in human science that proclaim itself to be a conservative or right guy. Not even one. And they, with the year, they auto-co-opt themselves, and they excommunicate those who are not changing, and they have absolutely no chances at all to even start an academic career. They wouldn't be chosen to become assistant and then professor.
Exactly.
Is it different? Guy, you've lived in the U.S. now for a couple of years. Is it different in Europe compared to, because many conservatives feel marginalized by the mainstream media here. How is it different in Europe, Western Europe?
I think that the left tries to do here in the United States what it did in Europe. They try to destroy conservative. They were pretty successful in universities. I could say that if you want to become a university professor in the US and you don't belong to the left, you have no chance. You will be completely excluded.
In any subject?
In any subject, I think, or even in sciences. In sciences, maybe if you hide that you're a conservative, if you got a tenure, then it will be hard for them to fire you. But if you say first that you're a conservative, even if you had a Nobel Prize, they would not hire you, I'm sure. And I could say that in the other field.
In history?
In history, you have
Certainly not.
No, absolutely not.
The most dangerous in history because
yeah.
you can
Yes.
come back with facts, you know.
And it can be dangerous to be conservative even if you don't teach, even if you don't write. I can see it because a good friend of mine who used to live in Florida and who is a conservative, he just writes on Facebook. And he changed his name because when he decided to move to Las Vegas, he will be a neighbor of mine very soon. He could see that when he wanted to hire a landscaper, things like that, people were saying, no, we don't want to work with you. They can start to make your life miserable here too, like in Europe. And so it's necessary to fight against that, because if you don't fight, the United States will become exactly like Europe today. And in Europe today, if you are not leftist, or if you don't say I support the left or I accept the left, and if you say you're a conservative, you're pushed away. And I could say, you were speaking about newspapers. In France, you used to have several newspapers. Some were conservative, some were center-left, others were left. Now, even the so-called conservative newspapers are leftist. For example, you had a newspaper called Le Figaro. It's supposed to be a conservative newspaper. You still have two journalists who are conservative because they have very good position, they cannot fire them, but the rest is completely leftist now. You just have to read what they write about the United States, about Trump, about Israel, about Iran, about almost everything, and it's the same than what you find in leftist newspapers.
They are lost cause, and you have to know that the case in France, the case in Wallonia, Belgium, they are heavily subsidized. They can get less and less readers. Still, they manage to stay in business. On average, in Wallonia, every journalist from the written press, the daily press, is subsidized to an amount up to 200,000 euro per year. 200,000 euro per year.
From who?
From the state. From the state. So it's not the journalists that receive it directly, it's the newspaper companies, but through various, there's direct help, there is a tax rebate that they get, but ultimately it amounts for a very large sum of monies. And so this means that journalists can criticize and can play the role of journalists within the system. Within what the established parties and the establishment call the acceptable bounds. There you can say, but if you are, if you cross these so-called boundaries, and there are boundaries that are in the heads, you know, then you are not anymore a player, a legitimate player, and that's how the system also protects itself, because without the subsidies, there would be no new newspaper anymore in Belgium, for sure.
Are you critical of Muslim immigration to Europe?
Yes, of course. I mean, if you look at let's give an example. Belgium, okay, and Brussels. Brussels is the capital of Europe, political capital of Europe. Brussels is the capital of Belgium. Approximately 1,200,000 people.
Muslim?
No, 200,000 people. But population Muslim today 45%. Within 5 to 6 years, they will be.
What are those numbers again? Say them slowly so I can write them.
Yeah, again, 45% of the population of Brussels today is Muslim. Half of it. Approximately half of the local MPs from Brussels are Muslim.
Parliamentarians.
Local
City?
parliament. Yeah. Yeah, and so this is the situation. So and it's an influx that is growing. And for example, in Belgium, 11 million people today. 1 million got in the last 10 years. So 10% of the population got in. So the change is dramatic. I give you another example. Antwerp, second most important city, the economic heart of Belgium with its harbor. Today, if you look at people under 25 years old, okay, 80% are either born abroad or from parents born abroad. So this means that in one generation, you will have replaced completely the natives. Yeah, that's the reality, and that's the demographics. And you can change a lot of things. The demographic you cannot change except if you take very radical measures. One is, of course, to close the borders to this influx, and the second, to expel those who have nothing to do in Europe based on objective criteria. You have people that do not accept the values. If you don't come in Europe and do not accept the European values, your place is not there. If you want Sharia, unfortunately, according to the polls, Guy reminded it, half of the people in Europe, that's a constant, half of the people in Europe from Muslim origin believe that Sharia should supersede civil law, our civil law. Those who want Sharia should go to countries that are Sharia compatible. I mean, they have 25 to 30 countries that could fit the criteria. You have other that came and that are not coming to contribute to the welfare of the society, that just come, to participate in a kind of open buffet of social security. Right. And this is not acceptable. It could be also expelled based on that criteria. If we don't take these measures, the demographic is what I have explained to you. And it's really worrying. And the same in France, yes. It's the same
in Italy, in Spain.
In Italy, in Spain, and yeah.
Okay. Now, if I can ask a question, because obviously, Guy lives in, he comes from France, but he's not Jewish, and the issue, the notion that Michael, you are Jewish, as am I, and people are saying, well, the Jews come and bring influence into the government positions, the professional positions, for some kind of a Jewish agenda. Guy, as a non-Jew, have you ever heard this? Experience that the Jews are bringing some kind of an agenda into professional or civic life?
No, not at all, not at all. I think that this kind of discourse is coming from people who are anti-Semite, and they don't want to say clearly who they are and what they are, so they use different ways to say it, but it's a way to say it. I could say that you see that you have journalists who are Jews, but most of the journalists who are Jews in France belong to the left, so they have no influence. They don't support Israel for the most part of them, or they say, I'm pro-Israel and I'm pro-Palestinian in the same time. It's preposterous. So no, there is strictly no Jewish influence. But what I can say is that when you support conservative positions, when you fight anti-Semitism in a country like France, when you support Israel, people say you must be a Jew. So it shows that you are in a country where anti-Semitism is very strong. For many people, if you fight anti-Semitism, you have to be a Jew. If you support Israel, you have to be a Jew.
They presume that you would be.
Exactly. And I say, no, I'm not a Jew, I'm just a human being that supports human values. Is it a problem for you?
In Belgium it's a bit different because, first of all, the Jews are not usually in politics or
Is that right?
Yeah, they are not very much involved. Those who were more in the business sector or in the diamond sector in Antwerp, but usually they weren't seen as having a lot of influence in Belgium. Although the Jews contribute a lot. I mean, the last two Nobel Prizes that Belgium got were Jewish migrants, but in physics. The two last Nobel Prizes that Belgium received were in physics, one 2 years or 3 years ago. It was a Jewish migrant, and the former one too was come from Russia. But what you can see, let's not talk about influence. What you can see, what I can tell you, is that the Jews are the kind of canary in the mine. You know what was the role of the canary in the mine, the coal mine? The canary, and you know, I come from Wallonia, where you have a lot of coal mines, and they closed now. But initially, when the miners were digging, you know, deep into the ground,
To the caves?
not
Into a mine?
the mines, yeah, in mines. It's 500 meters, 1,000 meters, you know, down there. The worst thing was the gas that could accumulate and
Poison gas.
sorry, gas,
Sulfur, methane.
exactly, and that could explode and could provoke fire and so on. So they were taking with them canary, small bird, you know, because when the canary was fainting and so on, this showed that the gas was there.
Was too dangerous for human survival.
Exactly. So the canary was really a symbol of impending danger, and so the Jews are kind of canary in the mine, you know, for society.
For the condition of fascism?
For the condition in general. And I can tell you that in Belgium, for example, it's a small community. We are talking about 30 to 40,000 Jews. They are leaving. The young
Leaving?
Leaving. The young generation doesn't stay. They go either in Israel or to the United States, to Florida or to other place, but they don't stay. That's clear. Even my generation, they're already preparing one step here, one step there, and even myself. I mean, I say as a Jew, although I'm politically involved, I say if it continues that way, my place is not anymore in Europe. Although, you know, I feel also deeply European. I feel deeply willing to fight for my people in Europe, but you have to look at the trend, and you know, the zeitgeist in Europe, let's call it the zeitgeist, is very negative. It's very negative towards Israel. It's very negative towards the value we cherish ourselves. It goes beyond politics, family values, and everything. And personally, I feel I don't recognize myself in what I read. You open newspaper, and you disagree with almost everything you read. You don't watch TV for a long time, that's for sure. But if you at least try to still read, that's it. I don't know what you're feeling, but this is.
I agree completely.
Yes?
Yes, I agree completely with
But it's
what
not-
Michael said.
It's not even better with the New York Times. I mean, I
No,
don't
no,
feel
no,
more
but-
comfortable with the New York Times or.
No, but here at least you still have a conservative
Debate.
media.
Yeah.
In Europe, you don't have conservative media anymore.
Well, you only have very little conservative media in broadcast, right? Maybe one and a half channels. And that's in flux. Fox is in flux.
Yes, I see that on Fox you still you have more and more liberal who speaks, but at least Fox exists. If you make a comparison between Fox and CNN and MSNBC, MSNBC and CNN are completely lost. They are leftist. They make propaganda, no information, not information anymore, and they look like what you have on all TV channel in France, and I think in Belgium. I think in Belgium it would be the same. At least you have Fox News here. In Europe, you don't have any Fox News. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, and you have Breitbart, and you have, you know, you have the Wall Street to some extent, and you have a lot of initiatives which don't exist, and even there exists something exists like my media, Le Peuple, and so on. You don't have support from companies or from people. There is no, for example, there is no in Europe tradition to donate. You don't have political support. Yeah.
I was president of a think tank in Paris for a couple of years, and all the money that was donated to our think tank was coming from the United States. All the money. Nothing was coming from a French or even from a European company. And sometimes president of company said, I support what you do, I support what you do, but if I support you, I would have problems with the IRS.
To complete the thought that we began before, if I may, just to get back to that idea. So, when Jews are in government, it's no threat to Gentiles or Christians. It's no threat that there's going to be some Jewish agenda to take over the society necessarily, right? Would you say that's true?
Yes, of course. But I don't hear people saying that the Jews are a threat and risk to take power in France right now. You don't find that.
Have you had the experience of Jews trying to advocate some kind of to change the way that,
No,
that
not
Gentiles live?
No, not at all. Never.
How about Muslims in government in Europe?
Oh, it starts to be completely different if you speak about Muslims, because in Belgium you have Muslims who have been elected. In France you don't have too many, but Muslims have a strong influence on laws. And for example,
Influence in what?
laws that are voted in the parliament. For example, you have laws against racism, against prejudice, and the only prejudice and the only racism that is fought is Islamophobia. And for many European lawyers, Islam becomes a race. If you criticize Islam, you're a racist. And it's very dangerous, because after that you're treated as a racist. People say you're racist, you have been condemned because you're a racist, etc., etc. So Muslims try to censor people, to push people to only praise Islam, to never criticize Islam, to say Islam is wonderful.
Well, but Jews don't want to have anti-Semitism either, right? They would like to have laws preventing a Holocaust denial, for example.
No, but it has no relation at all. You can criticize Islam for very good reasons. For example, if you say, you look at the Muslim world and count how many democracy you have, you will not find too many. If you speak about the connection between Islam and terrorism, you have very strong examples. I don't know many Jews who became terrorists.
So what does it mean, if I can ask Michael, what does it mean then to have Muslims in the parliament, in the European Parliament, in governance that governs all the countries, not just a city like Brussels that's 50 or 45%? What does it mean when Muslims are involved in the policy making, particularly regarding the Middle East and support for the Middle East and immigration?
First of all, I would like to add about the influence of the Jews and so on. For example, the French Jews are more French than the other. It's the intellectuals that are more like Finkelkraut. They are really fighting for the French spirit as it was as French intellectuals. Like, by the way, for example, a German before the Nazi, I mean, there was not more German than Jews. The Jews were very felt really pro-German, advancing the German cause and so on. So when you see Jews in power, usually they have not a hidden agenda. They are just trying to protect. Unfortunately, when you see Muslim getting elected and so on, you see that it's very often the agenda of their own community. We had, for example, the privilege, between brackets, to have the first veiled Muslim elected in Europe, in Brussels, and she was Turkish, from Turkish origin. She was a close supporter of the Sultan of Turkey that we mentioned this morning, and in fact, when you see, she only posted messages in Turk. There wasn't a message that she was posting on Facebook on the language, and whatever she posted was always related to issues of the Muslim community, the veil and the Sharia and all this matter. So unfortunately, I won't say that it's the case of all of them, because I have some people that I know that are Muslims and so on, and that are working for the the benefit of the community. I don't want to. They are. But if you look at the majority of them, they would be very ethnocentrist on their own community and their community, and that's true that they will very often modify the agenda and so on, and come with an anti-Israeli position, cutting ties or preventing bilateral relation and so on. But by the way, you don't need necessarily to have Muslims MPs. I mean, just regular candidates in order to please the Muslim community that is growing. When you have in Brussels, people that represent half of the population, and between 10 to 25, 30% in other places already. Of course, some tend just to try to please their expectations. Or
The Liberal Party,
what they believe to be. Sorry.
The Liberal parties are primarily.
It's clear that the link today is more with the Green, the Socialist, or the Communist, and so on. But if you look at even the centrist or liberal within the European meaning, conservative center to the right, these last year you can see a shift. They are more and more accommodating with them. Certainly less and less pro-Israeli. By the way, this is what I explain very often to my Israeli friends, that today the best friend they have in Europe are the populists.
Exactly.
And they don't get it very often because, for them, populists can be associated with far right and things like this, particularly at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They don't always get it right. But instinctively, a lot of populists feel that Israel is a kind of role model. Israel is exactly what Europe was and what Europe is not, or what they believe that Europe should be. This means a country, Israel, a country that has an understanding of what is its past. I mean, the Jewish people, its roots, proud to its roots, sticking to its roots and to its history, and with, at least for part of the Jews, a sense of history of where we are heading towards, and a people and a country both open and on science, even on the world, but also prepared to fight for its right, prepared to lead, to fight wars. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, I mean, it's important to see how young Israeli, for example, that can be in Tel Aviv and so on, dancing and so on, and the next day can go to war, with their friends and prepare to die and so on for their country. This is something that we are lacking in Europe. And for the populists, many of them, I mean, they feel that for this reason, Israel is a kind of example and role model. And I could see that in my party. There were almost no Jews beside myself. People that never went to Israel, that will never go, and still I could see a fairly large support for the Israeli position that you don't find in the rest of the society.
I agree.
So if you could offer a message to the American people based on the experience that you have, both as Republicans and also as people who are concerned about anti-Semitism and the fascism that rises on anti-Semitism, and that combination of anti-Semites in the left politically. When you say, Guy, you left, you emigrated out, and Michael, you're considering emigrating because what kind of a message would you, or a warning would you give to Americans today?
Listen, 3 years ago, I made a message of support to Donald Trump when he was only one of the 12 candidates of the Republican Party, and this message was on the internet, was some success in the US with 3 million views. And my message was simple, ultimately. It was, let not America become another Europe. Let's not become another Europe in terms of migration of the leftists taking over, in terms of economic socialism. We see where it led Europe. So far you are not. I mean, you have worrying trends. I see worrying trends, unfortunately, in Europe. I see how the Democratic Party has been infected rapidly, first by Obama and then the Squad and all these idiots, these young idiots, mentioning Cortes and not know what they are talking about, obviously. So let not America become. You can still hold firm on the ground. Let it not become another Europe, at least the Western Europe, because Central Europe and Eastern Europe are different. That would be my message. Fight hard for this and get Trump re-elected. Get Trump re-elected so that during 4 years he continue to hold firm and help transform the U.S.
Even for voters who never voted for a Republican before, people who are traditionally Democrats?
Certainly. I mean, the minorities should see that Trump has done much more for them economically than the Democrats for all these years. And then the Jewish community. I know the Jewish community crazily, and majority today still support the Democrats. If you look at the position of the Democrats, if you look what the Democrats are doing, what Obama did, the last vote he let go, at the UN before resign. If you see what the people like Cortez or Taib and those are doing, towards Israel, their permeability vis-à-vis the worst anti-Semites that are the Hamas people and so on. If there's a message to send the minorities and the Jews, for example, is vote Republican. Today they should be your own party. Leave the Democrats. Leave the Democrats. They are going on the wrong direction. And if a majority of the Jews leave, it will ensure Republican majority at the next election.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what Michael said, and I could say if you're a Jew in America, I cannot understand how you can still vote for Democrats. How can you be in the same party than anti-Semites who support terrorism, who support Palestinian terrorism, people like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar? How can you be in the same party? Could you have been in the same party than Nazi in Germany, for example? It's almost the same. It's becoming the same. And if you are not a Jew, I could say, look clearly at what Europe is becoming and look clearly at what Europe is right now.
And by the way,
do you want to become a country that looks like Europe today? Do you want to have welfare programs that are almost bankrupt? Do you want to have a poverty rising? Do you want to have migrants living in the streets? You have that in California, but not in the rest of the United States.
You have it on Champs-Élysées.
Yes, everywhere in Paris. You start to have slums and shanty towns just outside of Paris, and you don't want that. You have rats in the streets of Paris now, 100,000 of rats. Do you want this? Do you want to risk to have your throat slit when you walk in the street? It happens every week in France, somewhere. Do you want women to be threatened all the time, to be harassed? Do you want gang rapes every week? Do you want that? If you really want that, vote for the Democrats. You will get it.
Yeah, and on one example, you can see what's going on also in Europe, is that in the past you had a lot of socialists, of the Jews in the socialist parties. The Jew would usually be vote or be member. If you look at France, Léon Blum was prime minister and so on. You had still 10, 15 years ago, a lot of Jews in the socialist party. They fled. There are not so many left, If you look, and they were voting, and less and less Jews, if not very, very little vote for them. If you look at the Labour in the UK, because of Corbyn, the Jewish member of the British Parliament are leaving, or they are even threatened, or they are even expelled, but they are exiting and exiling themselves from the. So you have to. I think that the Jews have to understand that, unfortunately, with the evolution, the Socialist Party, wherever they are, be it in Europe or tomorrow with the Democrat in the US, are not anymore the natural host for them. I think they have to realize that. It's not in their interest.
I think that the people who still vote Democrat have to be leftist, have people who love, for example, what's happening in Venezuela. And I think that it's very important that Trump be re-elected next year. It's not a choice between right and left. It's a choice between civilization and what destroys civilization. And I think that the Democrat Party is a leftist party that wants to destroy America. You have to see it clearly.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time here together. It's so nice. You're so familiar with each other's situation.
We met 2 times. I see. It's the second time we meet. So, but
Yes,
I read him. I read him.
But we have a friend in common.
Yes, exactly.
And your experience in both countries, it isn't just a French issue, it isn't just a Belgian issue.
It's a Western European issue.
It's a
All
global
Western.
issue. It's a global issue.
Yes, exactly.
Is it now global?
Yeah, I think if you look, the biggest battle now today is between the globalist and the sovereignist. And you have people that are fighting for the sovereignism. You have, of course, in America, Trump. You have in Europe kind of people that we have seen this morning here with me at this in this panel. But you have Bolsonaro. You have Modi. That are people, even in Japan, for example, the current prime minister is clearly a sovereignist. And so the globalists have an agenda that we are all as human beings just interchangeable, that you can put people from everywhere, not sharing the same value, and put them together and everything will be fine. And we know, because of history, that it won't be fine. That in order to get people from different backgrounds all together, you have to share the same value. Let's go back to the Israeli experience. I mean, you can be in Tel Aviv, and see people coming from Yemen, from Iraq, from Russia, from the US, and so on, and going all well together. Why? Because beside the difference of colors, of skin, of whatsoever, we all share the same values.
Exactly.
And without this preliminary, cannot function. Goes to civil war ultimately, and this is what we fear.
Are we at that stage now of civil war?
Listen, this is not...
Maybe not with guns.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that's what I call low intensity civil war. Look at what happened in Paris 2 days ago. You have a guy that is a Martinique-born Christian, works for 20 years as in the police department, and convert to Islam. Goes to radical mosque, and then decide after a few months or years, of getting these speeches and so on, to come with knives and kill 4 or 5 of his colleagues. The description that have been made are terrible. If this is not civil war, if when you kill, like in the Bataclan, 130 persons, with machine gun and wound in an evening 400 other, or if you can kill, like in Nice, it was also 80 people with just a truck, or in Brussels 35 people killed in the airport and the subway, and this repeats itself. So this is low intensity warfare, but it has already all the forms, so it can aggravate, it can escalate, and we hope not. But unfortunately, if things continue in that direction, the conditions are set for that.
One more question for you. The Jewish side.